Monday, October 11th, the 28th of Tishrei. This is Dan, and this is the first installment of Classic.Hakdamot. We're going to be taking a look today at Rashi's commentary on the Torah and Rashi's introduction or non-introduction, as it turns out, to his commentary on the Torah. Before we get into the actual text and the sources that we want to study today, I first want to introduce two books that I thought were important to touch on, and as well as some biographical information about Rashi, because the historical context and Rashi's biography does play an important role in understanding his project and what he was trying to do. The first thing to note is that Rashi was born in France. He worked most of his life in France and he died in France, and at the time France was not a particularly large Jewish community. The main Jewish centers in Ashkenaz at the time were in Germany. However, Rashi spent about 10 years studying in Germany in the yeshiva, first in Mainz, Magenza, where he studied with Rabbi Yaakov ben Yakar, who was himself a student of Rabbeinu Gershom. And then Rashi, after the death of Rabbi Yaakov ben Yakar, went to Worms, Vermainza, where he studied in the yeshiva with Rabbi Yitzchak Halevi. A lot of the historical information about Rashi I got from Avraham Grossman's book on Rashi, which has been recently translated from Hebrew into English, and I'm reading and enjoying quite a bit. And another important detail about Rashi is it seems like he did not come from a rabbinic family. It seems like Rashi's father was not particularly wealthy and not particularly prominent in the community. However, it is possible that Rashi's mother's brother, his uncle, actually was a rabbi or a scholar of some sort. He does reference him time to time in his tshuvot, in his responsa. Rashi wrote commentaries on almost the entire Talmud and almost the entire Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, and his comprehensive commentaries have become ubiquitous in the study of all of these texts, at least in part because they were published popularly. It's interesting to note the luck of certain commentators is that they get published in popular printings of different texts, and that's just how it goes. But also the perpetuity with which Rashi's commentaries have been published is at least in part a testament to their usefulness and popularity, not just their luck in the history books of the printers. Part of the cultural milieu that Rashi was coming from when he was studying in Germany is that it seems like his rabbinic contemporaries in Germany were much more conservative regarding their approach to the customs of the German Jewish community, the textual interpretation and traditions of textual interpretation that they used in their yeshivot in Germany, as well as their communal structure. And Rashi, at least according to Grossman, and some scholars may debate Grossman's opinion, but according to Grossman, Rashi was much more innovative and much more, at least to a certain extent, of a radical, in that he was willing to entertain some flexibility and some new ideas, and we're going to see that Rashi's dedication to the pshat understanding of Tanakh may be, at least in part, a part of his project as almost his innovation and his contribution to Tanakh study in Europe at the time, is really bringing about this revolution, which started with Rashi and continued for several generations with an emphasis on what we call the pshat. And we'll have to get into what Rashi thinks pshat is and why does he think it's so important. Rashi lived in somewhat impoverished circumstances when he was in Germany. He writes in some of his responsa that his wife and daughters at the time, he had difficulty buying clothing or buying food to support his family, but he was very dedicated to his Torah study, and to a certain extent Rashi as a personality became venerated in the Ashkenazi community after his death, to the point where it becomes difficult to separate the legends about the man from the real biography of the man Rashi himself. Rashi's descendants include numerous prominent rabbis in the German and French Jewish communities, particularly his prominent student, the Riva, his son-in-law, the Rivan, as well as his three grandsons, Rashbam, Rivam, and Rabbeinu Tam, all contributed greatly to the development of the Tosfot school of Talmudic interpretation, which we probably won't touch on later in the series because there is no, so to say, introduction to the Tosfot. Perhaps I'll be corrected, or maybe I'll make a special tangential video to talk about Tosfot, but I don't think so. So the Tosfot took Rashi's Talmud commentary and developed newer, more analytic or more comparative textual critiques, which really pushed the development of Talmudic exegesis and Talmudic interpretation in France and Germany and England, and even going into Italy and Spain a little bit in the 12th, 13th, 14th centuries. Rashi's commentary to the Torah was the first printed Hebrew book. It was printed in Italy in 1475, and that really, again, is a testament to its popularity and to its significance. And like I said before, although Rashi does not have a real introduction as a standalone text to his commentary to the Torah, I was able to assemble a number of comments that Rashi makes in his commentary to the Torah that hint at what his project is and can serve to a certain extent as an insight into what he might have written had he written an introduction, or can serve as a pseudo-introduction to his commentary. If we take a look on the sheet that I prepared, the first source at the top is from Rashi's commentary to the Talmud on Yevamot, Kaf Daled Amud Aleph, 24a, and there Rashi is explaining a line from the Talmud, Ein mikra yodei midei pshuto, the text does not depart from its plain meaning, the text does not depart from its pshat. And here Rashi is explaining what the Talmud, one of the Amoraim, means when he says this. It also appears in Shabbat 63a, Samach Gimel Amud Aleph, and in the Gemara, it seems like the significance of this line is that the legal meaning of a text, the legal meaning of the Torah text, is not removed from its pshat. That is, even if a text is interpreted according to a drash, to a midrash that extrapolates or extracts a legal meaning from the text that does not necessarily fit the plain sense meaning or the simplest meaning of the words, nonetheless, the simple or plain meaning of the words is also legally significant. And that's what Rashi understands it to mean here. Even though the text is used for a midrash, darshinan ledrasha, we interpret it according to drash, nonetheless, it cannot be totally removed from its pshat, and therefore the pshat meaning, the simplest meaning, the plain meaning, is still legally significant. That's what Rashi means when he understands that Gemara, and that's what it seems the Gemara text may be meaning as well, which is that the legal implications of the pshat. However, Rashi's commentary on the Torah is not so concerned with the legal interpretations of the text, and much more is concerned with literary exegesis and really understanding what the Torah and Tanakh text is actually all about. And so, if we take a look at the four other sources on the page, three of them, interestingly enough, from Rashi's commentary on Parshat Breshit, really the first parsha in the Torah, and the first few parakim, the first three chapters of the Torah, Rashi already makes a number of comments about the significance of his project in bringing the pshat and the difference between pshat and drash. So here, the first source here is right from the first pasuk in the Torah, but it's not an introduction. It's not even Rashi's first comment on the Torah, but it is the second comment he makes on the Torah. And Rashi says, Ein hamikra hazeh omer ela darsheni. This verse is saying, you must interpret me. That's really what it's saying. It could only be understood as saying according to its drash. And nonetheless, im bata leparasho kipshuto kach parshehu. If you want to understand it according to the pshat, then I'm going to tell you what the pshat means. Rashi has here almost the audacity to contradict himself. He says at the same time, this text can only be interpreted according to drash, and nonetheless, I'm going to tell you the pshat anyway. That's really Rashi telling you, I think pshat is significant, I think pshat is important, and even though this verse can really only be understood in a religiously meaningful way as its drash, the drash is central and significant to understanding the rabbinic understanding of this verse and what place it has in Jewish religious tradition. Nonetheless, the pshat is important also, and I'm going to tell you what the pshat is, and the pshat will also become something important. It's another voice, it's another piece of the puzzle, and it's a significant voice which Rashi is bringing forward. And really that demonstrates his audacity and almost to a certain extent courage to come out and right at the beginning contradict something which he says is perfectly central, the rabbinic tradition about understanding this verse, and at the same time he comes and tells you another interpretation, another meaning that it could have. We go down to Rashi's comments on Breshit, Perek Gimel. This really is the paragraph which summarizes for Rashi what his project is in terms of interpreting the Torah. Rashi says, Yesh midrashei agada rabim. There are many different agadic midrashim, many different homiletic midrashim. Ukvar sidrum rabotenu al mechonam b'breshit rabbi v'shar midrashot. The rabbis have already collected them and accumulated them and organized them in different collections of midrashim. Many of these collections of midrashim were being edited and compiled even up until Rashi's time throughout the world, some in Italy, Greece, and in Eretz Yisrael and other places. And there were these midrash collections of different midrashim from the Talmud, from other midrash collections that were earlier, statements of earlier rabbis, particularly from the period of the Amoraim, and earlier and later. And Rashi is saying there are many different collections of midrashim. Nonetheless, ani lo vati ela l'pshuto shel mikra. I came only for two reasons. First is pshuto shel mikra, the plain meaning of the text, the simple meaning of the text. Pshat, what I think is Rashi's big innovation is to introduce the pshat. And two, the thing that people often forget when they're trying to tell you that Rashi is a pashtan, someone who strives for the pshat, Rashi also thinks it's very important for him to include in his commentary la'agadah hameyashevet divrei hamikra. That is the midrashim, those midrashim which he thinks, the agadot, those legendary interpretations or homiletic interpretations which fit the text well, which Rashi thinks explain the text in a way that makes sense and which fit the words of the text in a meaningful way. So Rashi is not just bringing you the pshat, he also is acknowledging the fact that many of his commentaries will include the midrash as well, but the midrashim which he includes are specific midrashim that he thinks fit the text and explain the text in a reasonable way. This is an important piece of Rashi's commentary, and it's important to note that Rashi's commentary is not just a collection of midrashim. Rashi is bringing you two different ingredients. Number one, pshat, and number two is the good midrashim, and at the same time to consider the fact that identifying which is which may be difficult at times. Often the pshat will be what Rashi thinks is are his own words, and the drash is something he's quoting from elsewhere. It's not necessarily true. Rashi on a number of occasions will say lines like pshuto kemashmao, the pshat follows the meaning of the words, which is difficult to decode what that means because we might have thought pshat is the same as mashmaut, the meaning. That's number one. Number two, pshuto ketargumo, the pshat follows the targum, the translation of the Torah into Aramaic by Onklos, which is the authoritative rabbinic translation of the Torah into Aramaic, not commonly studied as much as it should be anymore, but it carries, on the one hand, a very literal interpretation and translation of the Torah, but subtle changes which do lend important meaning to the rabbinic understanding of the Torah text, and therefore Rashi is willing to invoke pshuto ketargumo, the pshat follows the targum, the pshat follows onklos, and as well, on rare occasions, Rashi will actually say pshuto kemidrasho, the pshat follows the drash, the pshat follows this midrash, which I'm going to quote you, which is an interesting perspective, as Rashi is willing to acknowledge the fact that what is a drash, fundamentally, it is exegetical, homiletical interpretation, nonetheless may carry the plain or simplest meaning of the text as well, or what Rashi thinks fits the words the best. Fine. The final paragraph here on the page, Rashi's comment to Shmot, Perek Vav, again, is echoing the same idea about pshat, but he takes it a step further. He brings a proof text to support and illustrate what he really means by the significance of the pshat. And Rashi says here, Lachach, Ani Omer Yashev HaMikra Pshuto. Here, I'm saying this text should be interpreted according to its pshat, according to its plain meaning. Davar Dabur Al Fanav, each statement fits its context. V'hadrasha tidaresh. I'm not saying you should take away the drash. I'm saying hadrasha tidaresh. The drash should still be drashed. The drash should still be taught. The drash should still be interpreted. But drash has its place, and pshat has its place. Each has its significance, each has its place. Shne'emar, a quote from Jeremiah, a quote from Yirmiyahu, Halo ko divarai ka'esh ne'um Hashem. God says, my words, God's words are like a fire, ukepatish yifotzei tzela, and like a hammer which shatters a rock. And Rashi says, mitchaleket lekama nitzotzot. God's word, revelation, the text of the Tanakh, is like a hammer which shatters a rock. As soon as the rock shatters into multiple pieces, into multiple shards, perhaps these are strains of thought or possibilities for human comprehension of what is, in essence, a divine product, then there are kama nitzotzot. When the rock is shattered, when the rock breaks, there are many different possibilities. There are many different interpretations. And this is Rashi's core thesis to a certain extent, which is that the Torah text is multivocal. There is a significance to the pshat, the plain meaning of the text, and there is a significance and a place for the drash as well. He's not pushing away the drash. He's not getting rid of the rabbinic tradition and the rabbinic interpretation. He thinks it has a place. He brings you even the drashot that he thinks fit the text very well. He acknowledges the existence and significance of drashot, even those that he does not quote. And at the same time, he thinks, and is central to his project, to teach you the pshat as well. So this really Rashi's main points here about his commentary to the Torah is to introduce really the idea of a pshat as distinct and separate from the rabbinic interpretation according to Midrash. At the same time, he sees them both as significant, both as part of a bigger whole, and he sees revelation in perhaps a more mystical way. God's words are like fire. God's words are like a hammer shattering a stone. Each idea from the Tanakh can be interpreted in a variety of ways. The text is multivocal. The text has possibilities. perhaps many, many different possibilities, as we'll see in a later installment from some of Rashi's junior colleagues. And this is really the significance of Rashi's project, is to bring forward and introduce in the Ashkenazi community and in France at the time the significance of both pshat and drash. This is the end of the first segment. I hope to have a second and third segment up very soon, and I hope you enjoyed. Have